if you're in a leadership position, you set the example of what you can do, and then you teach people. And that's what I was doing with my reports at Days Inn. When I first became, that was the first company I became actually a president of. And I would write these reports. I'd say, this is idiotic, you made a stupid call here, you should have done this, you should have done that, we do this, do that. Because I was implanting my culture into those customer service people. And if somebody did something right, I'd say, hooray, hooray, that's terrific, congratulations, and I'd back them up. And sure, you're going to make mistakes, but if you make mistake to satisfy the customer, the leadership should accept those mistakes. Say, well, so this, let's go back to this example. So the waitress comes in, or the server comes in, and she says, you didn't like the dessert? Fine, I'm taking it off the check. And somebody should say, or another waitress comes in and says, well, I'll give you another one. And either one of those, you know, and if I'm the boss, and if I would never criticize either one of those, was the customer satisfied with that? Mm-hmm. And how do you know? But then if I get a letter the customer wasn't satisfied, let's say they wanted to be a full refund. Now, she's not going to do that, but she may go to a supervisor and say, well, these people were unhappy. What should I do? And you have to make a decision. And the way I did it was, if they didn't like the dessert, they wouldn't pay for anything. But that's a different, you know, that was looked by most people as being outrageous. That nobody would, why would you give it away? If they ate the salmon and you had a lousy dessert, actually the dessert was pretty good, but if they, why would you give them the whole thing? I'd say give them the whole bag, because I want them satisfied. And that's a very liberal way of looking at it, and I'm not saying a political term, a liberal way of looking at it. It's a liberal way of solving the complaint, but at the end of the day, I want that customer to come back. And if I want the customer to come back, I have to make sure that I went the extra mile to satisfy them. And it's very hard. In the salespeople, in the early going of salespeople, when I was in sales, down the street here, 46th Street and Madison Avenue, and it was appalling to me how little people cared about the customer. And I was marketing director at the hotel on 59th Street for a couple of years. And the banquet department ran the show. The banquet department was a big banquet house, and the banquet department ran the show, and I couldn't get my customers, my meeting customers, and everybody in there. So one day I had a corporate meeting, and the price of the dinner, I forget the name of what it was, many years ago, but let's say it was $25 for a dinner. I said to the banquet manager, isn't this the same menu that you gave for Mrs. Cohen's wedding from Long Island? She had a wedding for her daughter last week. He said, yeah, it is. I said, well, Mrs. Cohen paid $70. Why is she paying $70 and the corporate customer is paying $25? And he said to me, well, Mrs. Cohen wants to pay $70. So I said, well, I don't think that's fine. Are you doing something better for Mrs. Cohen? No. So he was taking advantage of a customer, which I think is wrong also. And so, but it depends on what your philosophy is when you run the business. And if it comes from the top, you're going to squeeze every dollar out of every customer, and you're going to short them in their customer experience. Eventually, you're going to lose business. There's a lot of competition. Mm-hmm. And this may be the best hotel in Budapest, and it may be #1 on TripAdvisor, but the real question is, when something goes wrong, how do they handle that customer?
Exactly.
Because I live in a community in Florida called, it's a club. There are 650 homes and about 1,200 members, maybe. And everybody complains all the time. They're always complaining. And the reason they're always complaining is because they live there for 5 or 6 months or a year. Mm-hmm. And if I lived in any of your hotels or any of your situations for 6 months, I'm going to have something to complain about, because you can't be perfect. So it's different, though, in a hotel where somebody comes 1 night or 2 nights. In a resort, you get more risk to the customer, so you have to be better. And in a club where people are constantly there, you have to continue to get better. We have a person running that club who used to work for, and the people moan and groan, and he makes no effort to satisfy anybody. But he satisfies enough of the board to make it work, so that he's taking care of his bosses, so to speak, not taking care of the customer. All this is. You don't have to be in this business as long as I've been to understand it. I can see the looks in their face. You have this all the time. And especially in all my work with HSMA over the years, before I was actually operationally running businesses, the biggest complaint I had from other sales and marketing people was their inability to satisfy customers, because they were getting blocked by the owners and managers. The further away the owner and manager is from the customer, the more insensitive they are to the customer's need. But salespeople were close to customers, so they get it right away. And when I started, I couldn't satisfy a customer in the early going.